Hey, I'm Siobhan, and I love talking about all the things related to freedom and personal growth. And I'm on a journey to redefine freedom on my own terms as I become the woman I desire to be. Each week, I'll share in real time what I'm learning as I do my inner work while creating a safe space for my listeners to feel seen. If you desire to be free and live a life that feels good to you, then you're in the right place for beautiful conversations that's going to support you on your journey to freedom. Welcome to the Siobhan J. Middleton podcast. Now let's start the show. Hey, welcome back to another episode of my podcast. Per usual, I'm so happy that you are here again for another week as I share in real time how I'm navigating this beautiful life that I get to live and supporting you as you discover how to redefine freedom on your own terms. I'll continue to say, because there has been a transition over the years, but my podcast is for both men and women because I believe what I have to share, anyone can be inspired and motivated to show up for themselves. So this week's episode is a follow-up, I would guess, from the most recent episode titled Starting Over. And that's because I received several messages from both men and women extending gratitude for that episode, thanking me for that episode, and also was sharing their stories with me. And there was one response in particular that I wanted to share on the podcast because I'm like, what this young lady is asking is relatable, and I'm sure other people listening can see themselves in the question that she's asking. And when she sent me the DM, I was very grateful for it, and I sat with it for a minute, and I told her that I wanted to kind of think through my response and what I wanted to share based on what she was asking. And then I wanted to respond on the podcast. Now, I'm not going to give her name or anything like that because that's not necessary. But I wanted to share this on the podcast because, again, I feel like many people can relate. And so one of the things that she shared in the DM that she sent me was that she's 45 years old and she's feeling lost, scared, and overwhelmed. And first, I want to say that 45 is very young. And it also makes sense that at this point of your life, you're feeling lost and scared and overwhelmed because I, too, remember having those exact same feelings. And that was when I turned 40. And I've shared this on a podcast before that when my birthday hit, I felt like something was missing from my life. And I didn't like the way that my life felt to me. Almost like I was living someone else's life and not my own. And I didn't know what that really meant. And so now I can name the feeling that, yes, there was some anxiety. Yeah, I felt lost in my life because I felt like it should have felt different than what it felt like to me. And scared that if I didn't change or if I didn't do anything, I basically would have been dying a slow death. And I know that's a little extreme to say, but that's what it felt like to me. At one point, there was this nagging feeling that I could not shake. It was a nagging feeling that I hadn't experienced before, but there was an awareness to my life that my kids were getting older, that I was growing my company, and yet there were still parts of me that hadn't matured, that felt stuck. The overwhelming feeling was, well, what do I do about this? And I don't know if you've ever had this feeling before, but it's constant. And there's two things that can happen. You can continue to exist and go through the motions and suppress the feelings that you're having, or you can realize, wait, I'm not living my life. And what do I need to do with this information that I now have? So many people choose to stay in the feeling of being scared, lost, overwhelmed, uncertain, unsure, what have you. And they find ways to suppress those feelings because they don't want to deal with them. They can do that with food addictions and sex addictions, alcohol, what have you, or to cover up what they're actually feeling. So then that way they can continue to exist through their everyday life. But then there's other people where you start to feel your feelings and you can't shake it. And you're like, well, what do I do with this? So I'm so grateful that I received this DM because so many people are at a point in their lives where they are feeling lost and hopeless and wanting more, but have no idea on how to start or where to shift things, right? And when I realized, just like this listener, when my life felt so scary, so overwhelming, if I felt lost, because I'm like, where do I even start? Now that this feeling or these feelings are nagging me, where do I start to change? How do I change? What does that look like? At that time, I had no idea. And that makes sense based on where I was in my life. And I'm so grateful to be able to respond to this now because I have, and I'm going to share with you the exact things that I feel like will be very helpful if you can relate to being at this point in your life. First, I want to say that all of these feelings are valid. Like, don't feel embarrassed or ashamed of the feelings. They are very valid and completely normal. And so many people that are listening, the thousands of people that are listening all across the world can relate to exactly what you're saying. The other thing that I want to point out is that you're not supposed to have life all figured out. Age plays no part in that because you have people that are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s and still don't have life figured out. So it's not based on an age, but living life and gaining wisdom. And then what are you learning along the way? And this is your first time being this age, right? So there's some things that you don't know just based on your life experiences. And I just want you to kind of take that in, that it doesn't matter if you're in your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, what have you, that doesn't matter. And don't judge yourself like, oh, well, I'm 45 or I'm 55 or 65, 25, whatever, and I'm supposed to have my life figured out. No, we're all figuring it out moment by moment by moment. And let me tell you, most people, if not all, have no idea. They're just kind of figuring it out along the way. Another thing, and this is specific to the DM that I received, is because she asked, how did I gain confidence and, how was I able to become more self-aware? And I will say that you are self-aware. You are, because you were able to acknowledge the big feelings that you're having right now. Most people, and I was here, where I could not identify my feelings. And that was because I didn't grow up with people who allowed me to be emotional. When I did have feelings, it was only focused on the positive feelings. Don't allow the negative feelings in. And so because of that, it took me being an adult and living some life that I'm like, no, both feelings are valid and I get to have both, and that's okay. The positive feelings are great. The negative feelings are great. Now, we don't like to feel the negative feelings, but the negative feelings move us to growth, move us to healing, move us to acceptance, So I think that just by being aware of what you're feeling is a wonderful, wonderful starting point. And that's the beauty, that you can acknowledge your feelings. And I am going to encourage you to sit with your feelings and explore when you're feeling lost, overwhelmed, scared, or whatever negative feeling that you're having. And then ask yourself, well, why am I feeling like this? Why am I feeling scared? Why am I feeling lost? Why am I feeling unsure? Why am I feeling overwhelmed? And sit with that. So, for example, when I was feeling lost and overwhelmed in my own life, and I had this huge epiphany when I turned 40, I didn't know where to begin to even change. All I knew that there was some discomfort in my body that I hadn't acknowledged before. And it was a very, very, very scary feeling. And the reason being, it was because I had to be honest with myself about what I was feeling. I had to answer the question why I was feeling that, and then the truth that came as a result. And the reason that was difficult, because what was coming up for me, it didn't only affect me, it affected the people that I was closest to. The next part that I want to address from the DM that I received is that she mentioned pleasing other people and putting other people before herself. And if you are a people pleaser, because this was me, you have to get to a point where you will no longer put other people's needs before your own. And that's your children. And I know that's hard if you're a parent, but that's anyone that's connected to you. Because the thing is, and this is what I have learned over time, that the more that you say yes to other people, a part of you is saying no to yourself, which is a way of abandoning yourself. And I intentionally use that word because abandonment is something that I have been exposed to at a very early age, and I have been working through, and it's a learned behavior because my mother and my father made choices that forever affected my life. And because of their choices, I too have learned how to abandon myself to make other people happy. And I refuse to do that anymore, right? You were not created to please other people. You are here to tend to and nurture yourself. And this is not something that's going to happen overnight, but with practice, you can learn how to put yourself first. So I wanted to address that first, okay? Because I think so many people listening can relate to being at a certain point in your life and you just thought it would look and feel different, and it doesn't feel the way that you want it to. And so you're scared. You don't know what to do. You feel stuck, right? And so I'm hoping that just addressing that part first is going to be helpful. But then the second part is the question that she asked was, what are 1 to 3 things that she can do consistently to build confidence and self-awareness? And this is the thing that I had to explore a little bit more, because I had to go back to, well, when you felt that way, what did you do? So then I had to really sit with, okay, Siobhan, go back to when you were in the heat of it. What came up for you then? What did you have to do to build your confidence, your self-awareness, to not feel overwhelmed and so lost? And before I give my response to that, I want you to know that no one truly has all the answers for you, because everyone is living their own life. So I'm going to share what I had to do in hopes that you will be inspired and find your way. And I also want you to check in with your heart. I want you to check in with your intuition and listen to what you hear internally. And notice what you notice. Pay attention to everything. And so when I go back to that moment, the first thing that I had to do was I had to feel my pain. And I'm sure that's probably not an answer that you want to hear, but that is the truth. I had to feel the emotional, the mental, psychological pain that I was in. And it was hard. Some of the hardest work that I've ever had to do. And I'll say that the pain that I was experiencing, I had to sit in it. I had to feel it. I remember I kept going back, and this part makes me a little bit emotional, because I remember I would keep asking my friends every time something came up that was more painful than the last thing. I would say, am I going to be okay? And every single friend of mine was like, yes, Siobhan, you're going to be okay. And also they reminded me that it was going to get worse before it got better. And I didn't want to hear that, because I'm like, it can't get no worse than this. And they were right. It did. But it was hard. And I had to sit in it. And I'm telling you, and I know I talked about this on another episode, but there was one point where I'm like, this shit is going to cause me to have a nervous breakdown. This is more pain than I could have ever imagined feeling. But then the thought process too was, well, if you can heal your mother wounds and make peace with the absence of your father, surely you're going to get through this too. But that's the first thing. I had to feel the pain. I had to allow it to get even more painful. And I'm saying that because the pain then moved me to action. The pain is what moved me to take the next step and the next step and the next step. And had I not been in so much emotional pain, I wouldn't have made any move forward. I would have stayed in that space. And how I imagined it to be, it felt like I had been asleep to my life for a very long time, numb to my life. I had disassociated, right? And when I turned 40 and just having all these revelations, there was a part of me that woke up. And I kept telling my friends, I'm like, man, I don't want to fall back asleep, because if I fall back asleep, then another year, 2 years, 3 years will go by and I'll be in the same space of feeling overwhelmed, lost, stuck, unhappy, miserable. And I didn't want that. And so that's the first part. You got to feel the pain. The second thing is you have to find community. You have to find community and you have to find resources. So one of the things that was very important to me, thanks to one of my friends, was that I needed to find a therapist to specifically help me with the transition of leaving my marriage and processing my divorce. I had to. And I was so triggered. I mean, it was, oh my gosh, it was so intense at times. But I needed that support, because otherwise I don't know how I would have navigated the pain. I don't know how I could have continued to stay in the pain without having support. I think the other part is having really, really great friends as a support system. They never got tired of hearing me. They were truly a safe space for me to express what was happening, and they kept encouraging me. And I'm forever grateful for my friendships. And I think the other piece is finding resources to support where I was, right? And so there were 3 books specifically that I read that was very, very helpful for me. And I believe I talked about all of them on this podcast before. The one book is called Untamed by Glennon Doyle. There's another book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And then there's the last book is called Available. And each book served me in its own way. And reading these books helped me to have some grounding within myself, And I think if I just kind of go back to the friendship part, like my friends allowed me to be vulnerable. They allowed me to be transparent and honest, and they held space for me. And if I can encourage anything, you need your people, you need community, you need friends, you need resources to help you during this time when you feel like your life is falling apart. You need that. And I am very big, if y'all have been listening to this podcast for any amount of time, community is everything to me. We all need someone or people to help us along this journey, And then the last thing, I made a decision after reading the book Untamed that I would not disappoint myself any longer. That I would have to disappoint everyone else before I disappointed myself. And making that decision was very hard because I had to disappoint my children and my ex, right? And in doing that, I had to accept whatever they felt about the choice that I was making. And it was hard. It was hard having to look my children in the eye and let them know different things that was coming up. And also, as it relates to feeling the pain, finding community and resources, and disappointing others, I would do this 100 times over to be in the exact space I am today. This is what was helpful for me to build more confidence within myself, to become more self-aware. It was knowing that at some point, everything was going to work out, even though I didn't know how it was. And at times I didn't feel that it was. But I did trust and believe that, because I can look at other aspects of my life and everything had always worked out for me. And leaning in on that was really helpful. I'm going to read you a quote from the book Untamed. And I also encourage you, like, if this really resonates with you, go back and listen to the episode where I share more about how this book changed my life. Every time you're given a choice between disappointing someone else and disappointing yourself, your duty is to disappoint that someone else. Your job throughout your entire life is to disappoint as many people as it takes to avoid disappointing yourself. And there's times when I have to reread that over and over and over again, because we, specifically women, but I'm sure men do this as well, where we please other people and we forget about ourselves. And this book gave me permission to disappoint everybody else but myself. And even if that meant disappointing my children. And I did disappoint them, because now they are the product of divorced parents. And also, it was the best decision for all of us, you know? And so that is how I've been able to build my confidence, because now I'm like, okay, you can feel your feelings, you feel the pain, you have your community, you have your resources, you're okay with disappointing other people, okay. And that's it. That was such a beautiful question. I'm so grateful that I was asked that. And I'm sure that as it relates to starting over with your life, no matter where you're at, that you always make sure that you put you first. And I know we hear that over and over and over again. But the other thing to this, and this is something that later came to mind about maybe a year and a half ago, not a little bit later, is that I can't abandon myself. I cannot abandon myself to make other people happy. And I don't want anybody doing that for me. We all have to take good care of ourselves. And so my hope as you listen to this episode, that you're encouraged, that you're inspired, but it's not just another thing that you listen to. I hope that you've taken notes. And if you didn't, go back and re-listen and take notes, but do something with what you heard today. Don't just say, oh, that was a good podcast. No. What are you going to do with what you heard? Because you listened up until this point for a reason, so something is resonating with you. I've said this on other episodes, and I'll say it again. We have one life to live, and life goes by very swiftly. What are you going to do with the life that you're living? Viola Davis said it best, and this is my mantra. The purpose of life is to live it. And I want you to live a fulfilled life, a free life, a life that feels good to you inside and out. And understand that we're all trying to figure out what life means. Nobody has all the answers. No one has it all figured out. I don't care what you see on social media. No one has. But this is your life. And you have to choose how you want to show up. And I don't want a year to go by, 6 months, a month, a week to go by, and you're in the same exact spot. No, you have the ability to do something different. You have the ability to make a different decision. Will you choose to stay where you're at? Or will you choose a different path? And I'm sorry to tell you, but and you're going to be okay. Everything is going to work out for you exactly the way it's supposed to. I trust that. And I trust it because that has been my life experience. So I hope this answered your question from the lady. I know she's listening. And to anyone else, please continue to send me emails, send me DMs. Let me know what you think of the episode. If you have questions, if you want me to elaborate, if you have topics, shoot it my way. I'm here. If you are inspired in any capacity or moved, please treat me to a cup of coffee, 2, 3, 4, whatever. You can do that by clicking the link in the show notes. I also have a newsletter that I send out that you can subscribe to. You can become a free subscriber or paid subscriber, whichever you choose, but that link is in the show notes as well. I would love for you to subscribe to the podcast if you're not. You can leave a review on Apple Podcasts, a comment on YouTube and Apple Podcasts, and I believe Spotify as well. Until next time, I'm just sending you so much love and light, and I hope you have the most amazing day ever.